try to do a good job of making other people feel seen. But I guess I'd like someone to walk up to me and say, hey, why the long face?
Maybe you're the bodhisattva and you wake someone up and you help them feel seen. If someone as smart and tender as you is not going to carry that torch, who's going to carry it? When I fell in love with Alan Watts, I thought, wow, he lived on a boat. I would go to his dock, and when he comes off the dock, I said, listen, I'm going to scrub barnacles off the bottom of your boat if I have to, but I'm going to spend time with you. Elon Musk and I had dinner twice at Lynn and Norman Lear's house years ago before anyone knew who he was. No one wanted to talk to him, and he and I hit it off. And I said, what are you doing? He says, I'm putting a rocket on Mars. And I said, that's cool, man. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm making this film. And he was fascinated with what I was doing, and I was fascinated with what he was doing. You are one of the individuals with depth of intelligence and also a breadth of tenderness. It also means that you're sensitive to the world, and so you're not going to be oftentimes comfortable in a group setting. I'm the same way. Ken Wilber's the same way.
Hello, Sebastian.
Well, hello.
How are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Pretty good. I just went on my calendar and I searched when our first chat was. It was in 29th November 2023. It's felt like a year ago, but it's only been, I guess, 7 months.
That's wild, huh?
And I think this is a first for me. You're the first person that's come on the podcast twice.
Really?
Yes. So I'm pretty excited to have you back on, Sebastian. I loved our chat 7 months ago. That first conversation we had, I felt like we could go on forever. So it's great to have you back on for part two.
Well, I love what you're doing. And I think with anything that's, of depth, structure, it takes time. Pop, kind of draw lowest common denominators, like as many people as possible, as fast as possible. But it's also goes out of style fast. It's trendy, like the new jacket or the shoes. Everybody wants it, and then 2 years later, 3 years later, people are like, that's weird looking. And so I think when you have work like Ken Wilber's work, for instance, it's hard to get into, but it endures. It'll be around not just in a year or 5 years or 10 years, but in 100 years, 500 years. It's formidable thought in line with sort of perennial philosophy, i.e. religions that are 1,500, 2,000, 3, 4,000 years old, pointing at things, I think, that go on. And so I think your work is indicative of that, your intuition, I think, to follow that and trust yourself on that, regardless of what the response is. And I think that I respect that and I appreciate that, because there are very few people willing to do that and to stay with it. Ken is one of them. I'm one of them, and so you're one of them. And I'm grateful for your work.
No, thank you, Sebastian. Let me give a bit of an introduction so that the audience has a bit more context. Sebastian is an amazing screenwriter, director, author, actor. He's well known for his movie Grace&Grit, and that's how I came across Sebastian. It was this beautiful movie adapted from Ken Wilber's life. Loved the movie, loved the soundtrack. It was such an amazing, beautiful movie. It's one of the most watched movies on Netflix in Latin America, which is freaking amazing. Lorraine Williamson said that Sebastian Siegel draws insights into the beauty and complexities of the human condition with an inspiring original voice, instead of just following your content on social media and Instagram. And I love those daily sit-down videos you do. You definitely have this original voice. And it's something that I can see, if I look back at you talking in a video 10 years ago, the voice has maintained consistent, which is beautiful. So that's an introduction on who Sebastian is.
Thank you for that. What you said about looking back at the videos or interviews with me, whether it's 10 or 15 years ago, and sometimes those things will come up, whether it's at LA County Probation and I had a program with incarcerated youth, or my first documentary film, Awakening World, and when I was on the festival circuit with that and doing discussions around that, the telos is very much the same as it is today. I think the work has been refined and cultivated and grown, in texture and depth, but the telos is very much the same. And so I appreciate that. And I think about the people I admire. Perhaps it's been like that instinctually and intuitively, but also I think the people that I've admired, whether I was aware of it or not, had that as well. Like Ken, his first book that he wrote when he was 23 or 24, Up from Eden and the Spectrum of Consciousness, and then, later No Boundary. His work today is so complex, right? But it builds still from that initial instinct and impulse. And I think that when we follow that, right, we're following something that's not only, deep in our intuition and in our subconscious, but all the way back to not just yesterday or 10 years ago or childhood or the womb, but even at conception and even before that, in other words, the same question is, where do ideas come from? They don't come from here, right? They're changed and shaped here, but they come from out here. They come from all over. They come through us, right? We're just vehicles for these ideas that are going to come regardless. Like the rain is going to come regardless of the cloud, and we're just one of those clouds. And so I think, the intuition to stay with something and to follow that regardless of how the surrounding responds, in terms of do they like it or not, takes integrity, and so I appreciate you staying so vigilant with your show and your podcast, seeking out to engage people and with depth conversation.
And it's amazing how you've been able to stay on that path for such a long period of time. Like, I have been blessed that 2-3 years ago business was doing well, and that gave me the opportunity to try things such as the podcast, which I really enjoy. But the podcast makes no money. We don't really monetize it. We don't have sponsors. And now, as I'm starting to bleed out and our company's running out of money and I have a lot of sort of responsibilities, it's getting harder and harder for me to stay on this path. And I can sort of see myself thinking, like, do I need to get a job? Do I need to start selling assets? Do I need to start letting employees go? Do I need to stop focus? Should I give up on the podcast and focus on money generating activities? How have you been able to sort of stay on path for such a long period of time?
That's such a humble and courageous and beautiful statement. I have respect for it on so many levels, right? And I want to draw a map of my own, yeah, to support that, but also even to preface, looking at anyone at the highest level, it requires that, whether it's selling books, yeah, that becomes Amazon, where everyone was like, ha ha ha, you're never going to sell books online, right? Becomes one of the biggest companies in the world. And, Elon as well, obviously, like, you're never going to send a rocket to Mars, that's insane, right? And then when he finally had the call with NASA and they were going to cover him and support him, I think at the call, he like freaked out. He like cussed and said, "Fuck, thank you so much," and then he was like, "Oh my God," because the breakthrough was so long, trusting the intuition without seeing the response, right? Where I'm going with that is, like, we plant and then there's a long winter before we harvest. I think initially, just very pragmatically and specifically, like with your show, the diverse range of individuals that you have, from myself to Ken Wilber to other people who are influential, I think there is marketing opportunity there to have endorsement on core level, a number of different, whether it's Hop Water or, Shambhala Publications or another book publishing company. And maybe it's a number of companies that don't have huge, volume to be able to spend a lot, but something perhaps, and then perhaps the outlet is something like with Gaia, yeah, or, I don't, there are other outlets now that are doing kind of partnerships and rev splits that are based in consciousness and health and other things, for sure. From my own self, absolutely, it's the same story, right? When I started with my first documentary, I was making so much money. I was shooting so many commercials and campaigns. I was working as an actor. I was shooting magazine covers. It was great. And so I put my first short film on my American Express card. I put my first documentary on my American Express card. And I was just like, we're just going to shoot. Like, let's just go for it, and I would just hire people, pay them whatever was necessary for the day, and get it done. And then when I edited, same thing. And then eventually it found its way, and it was many years, right, before that found its way. When I used to write for the Huffington Post as well, there's no money there, and I was writing sort of, culture and kind of creative philosophy, if you will. And my grandmother used to say, like, why do you do that? It doesn't pay. It takes so much time, right? And I was, excited to write for the Huffington Post because at that juncture it was something, before Instagram. And I think, before I met Ken Wilber, probably the people who were in his camp at the time and himself probably read that work, and they probably thought, and assessed me and evaluated me, not based on metrics, but based on substance, and said, this guy gets it. Like, he understands the imprint. And so that led to ultimately us meeting and then me making Grace&Grit. I think that's one doorway, that I trusted and gave myself to. And I wrote a lot of stuff on Huffington Post. Took a lot of time, a lot of editing. It was cumbersome back then, particularly. And I think it's the same thing, with a movie. It's the same thing with a podcast, with a show, that you're essentially a venture capitalist in so many ways, right? You're investing in something, that's taking like, so many assets and putting it into it, and so many individuals, and saying like, is it going to go? Is it going to go? We have these outlets here. How do we scale this outward, or upward? And I think that we have to look at it as an art and a business, and a skill set. But I think that when we love what we do, the best thing is to have no other option sometimes, because then we have to reach out and say, the number of meetings I have to put a button on this, how do you make something profitable that you love, right? And that's really the question. I don't know, a lot of meetings. I go through gaps when I don't, but I'll do X number of meetings at my house or in person, and I'll just invite someone to dinner if I really want to collaborate with them, or I'm curious and I intuitively feel like it's valuable. And I'll say, what can we do here? Like, my first question is, what is not expensive to me where I can add to you this enormous value, right? Like, I want to give you this enormous value, and it's not really that costly to me, but give huge value for you, right? And then what is it that you have that doesn't cost you anything, or very little, that's of huge value to me? That's the ultimate partnership, right? And when I seek out brands to collaborate with, whether it's in movies or health, or consciousness, I'm always seeking in that way, so whether it's publishing a book or, with a health product, being on all the magazines, I try to align myself very selectively with companies where I say, listen, I can support this company. Like, people will look to me, and say, wow, this guy has longevity and is an unbelievable athlete for so many years. And so what are the companies that align with that? Certain companies don't align with that, right? But certain other companies, health companies, really do align with that. They're looking, not just a year in the future or 3 years to go public or sell, but for many, many, many years. So I've been, able to align myself with those companies, but that's been 50 meetings where there's zero response, right? And then another 25 meetings where there's a little response, and 2 meetings where there's and then 1 meeting's a go. So it's like 1 out of 80 meetings, 1 out of 70 to 100 meetings where you actually get something where you move forward.
One thing I found really cool following your content, Sebastian, is that you're always sort of having dinners, doing sort of talks, having these small get-togethers. Tell me about sort of that. Like, it's so cool how you're always sort of, I guess, masterminding, meeting people, and sort of having these intimate sort of eclectic sort of dinner sort of conversations. And how do you pull that together, and what catalyzed you to consistently do this?
I like to learn, and I'm super curious, right? And I found that people are always seeking things that they want from other people. And immediately to flip that and think, well, wow, I'd love to partner with this person, right? Whoever it is, right? Somebody in the White House, or somebody in publishing, or somebody in film, right? And I think, well, what can I give to this person? Like Robert Shapiro is a great example, the famed attorney. He and I met, and I was like, wow, this guy's really impressive guy. His history's so impressive, right? So I said to him, and we hit it off. I knew he was interested in boxing and, philanthropy, and he was interested in sobriety. And so we started discussing. I was aware of who he was beyond an attorney. And so we found a common ground in those things that are important to him beyond law. And then we struck a rapport. And then I said, listen, I really want to invite you and your wife for dinner at my house, right? And he turned, he didn't accept at first. Thank you so much. And I saw him again, and we talked more. And I said, man, I'm going to invite you to dinner anywhere you want to go. Right? And still no. And then eventually I was like, we had rapport again. I ran into him again. This is over the course of a couple of years, 2, 3 years or something, right? And then eventually he was like, yeah, that sounds great. I'll be there, right? I'd invited him to a number of things. One was a movie screening that I was doing at a beautiful home. So he was seeing the invites that I was giving him were about how can I give to you? So then he felt like eventually, I'm sure, like, wow, this guy's really cool. Like he doesn't want anything from me. He's just interested in my mind, which was the case. Now, he and I don't have any common work, yeah, but wow, there's a mutual friendship and evaluation and appreciation of character there, and that's invaluable. So if somebody can cultivate that with 10 people or 100 people, imagine how many other people that touches. We're talking about thousands of people. So then there's a point where you say, like, I want to meet whoever, X, fill in the blank, right? Somebody knows somebody knows somebody. Well, I can vouch for this guy, I've had a number of friends run for president, yeah, close friends, both conservative and liberal. People who respect my character, who I respect, who we have very different ideas about many things, all of them. And some of them don't like each other at all, dislike each other even. But that's okay, yeah, right? Because my interest isn't to get anything from them. It's to say, wow, these people are doing something at the highest level, say running for president of the United States in the last 15 years, right? Decade, and I'm curious to learn. There's something for me to learn there, not learn. And I think that people feel that. And, in other words, tenacity, right, requires faith, right? And people who are self-made have tenacity. And so they feel that in others who have faith and who are sacrificing. They can feel it in the vernacular. They can feel it in the posture. They can feel it, in the way that they present themselves. I feel that in you. I mean, that's why I'm on your podcast here for the second time. Like, I get it. You're in it. You're in it. And I respect that, man. It's beautiful what you're doing. Yeah, it's beautiful. And that's how everyone starts. You look at so many of the greats, in every medium, and it starts with that. And the support shows up, right?
Over the last 6 months, I went really, really hard on sort of putting together things. Like if a friend was coming to town and he wanted to catch up for dinner, I was like, hey, let me invite some friends, put together a dinner. If someone I knew was interested in hiking, like, let's go on a hike, I'll invite some friends together. And I was just putting things together and just bringing a mixed group bag of people together. And, in doing so, people are going to be busy, people are going to last minute change their mind or flake or be sick or not show up. And after doing that for like a solid, I started probably going hard a year ago, ramped up 6 months ago. And then by like maybe roughly 2 months ago, I was like, man, this is exhausting. This is tiring. I'm just giving. I'm just outward. I was just so outwardly looking, outwardly trying to put things together, where I was like, I had to take a step back. In the last 2 months, I've been putting myself in a period of isolation where I'm reaching out to no one. I'm just, whatever comes in, but I'm doing no outbound. I'm doing things on my own again. I'm trying to get back to the version of me 3-4 years ago where I just did everything on my own. Is there a sweet spot? Am I going to swing back? What's your thoughts on sort of this trajectory I've gone through?
I think you're right in the sweet spot. I think that flux is appropriate. Push, 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 and then retreat, and not retreat, but pull back and allow, push, 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 and allow. Because when we're sleeping, when we're working on other things, the subconscious mind is working stuff out, and asking those questions. What is it that I want, right? How is it that I want to guide this? Where was there traction there that I should pursue? Does it feel like, no, there's no traction there? As great writers like Ken Wilber go through periods of intense writing and then nothing, and then intense writing and nothing. What you're saying about also, I think, having people in town and coordinating a lot of things. Yeah, it's a lot, right? It's a lot to orchestrate. I think sometimes it's nice to be very specific on the people, on the individuals. Yeah, and so then therefore the companies, right, or the vocations, and target them in, and maybe go further for fewer individuals, right? So like, for example, with Ken Wilber, I flew to Colorado to meet him for the first time, right? And so that already demonstrates, I'm staying in a hotel, I'm flying there, like that demonstrates a lot, right? And that's how you have to meet him. It's the only way. And so, right off the bat, it's clear that somebody's saying, I'm jumping through a level that everyone's interested, but they're like really jumping through something to go do that. And I push and then I pull back, right? I pull back and I the collaborations, I think when the vocation, right, or when the partnership, or when the project, or the idea of the project is aligned, right? And we say to ourselves, we ask ourselves, how can I contribute to this thing? What value can I bring? Right? It's such a great question to ask because then it's very clear, right? If I had this media company over here recently, wonderful guys, and they do these amazing documentary films. And I had been inviting them for a while, right? And they knew who I was. And then, but we weren't, not sure if they had a sense of where the collaboration was or potential similarities. And then we came by here, there ended up being all these collaborations. First it was just casual. We had sparkling water. We were in my house, and then I was saying how in awe and impressed I was with everything they were doing and how I'd love to bring value. What did they want to do next? And then they bring that up. And then because I'm already asking the question, it's right there fresh. It's already been percolating because I'm sort of know what they want to do. But then when they specify it, I really know. So, it's the same thing in film, right? I meet people like the man's Chinese theater, right? The IMAX Chinese theater, the biggest, most important movie theater in the world, where Gone with the Wind premiered and Top Gun and Rocky 3. They premiered Grace&Grit, my film, right? That's unreasonable in a lot of ways. Grace&Grit is not the kind of film that premieres at the Chinese theater. But the Chinese theater, those people saw my film and they said, this is special artwork. This is a special movie. Because it was a shutdown, it worked out, right? And I premiered at the Chinese theater IMAX. And I had been pushing those people. I had been pushing them to say, not, will you show my movie to the Chinese? I didn't even imagine that. I had just said, like, you guys are doing such incredible stuff. Like, I want to add value. In other words, you're doing these big, epic, $100 million movies, 50, 100 million plus movies, Chinese movies, big pop American movies. I do movies that, like, I know how to make a movie for 3 million look like 50, 60 million. I know, because I know how to make a commercial for 50 grand look like a million. I have a value to bring here. In other words, I can upscale, what you want for less money. I know how to be a storyteller, how to tell emotional stories, even if they're big action, epic franchise films. That's what I want to do for you. That's what I want to do for you. I want to do that for you. I don't even care about the money. I don't care. Right. And so then eventually they said, all right, well, we're going to watch your film. Right. And then they watched the film. They said, look, this is a real special film. Like, this film's going to trigger people. It's not for everybody. You know what? We're going to host you. And then they hosted me. And initially they weren't going to host me at the Chinese. They were just going to host me at Hollywood Boulevard at the Chinese complex. But then I got there and then they said, you know what? We'll host you at the IMAX. Sure. We'll host you at the Chinese theater. So I didn't anticipate that, but I followed my intuition because I was interested in saying, what can I provide to you, right?
Sebastian, given your massive contact list, how do you go about sort of if you have a showing or a movie night or you're going to the gym? Is it all in your brain who might be a good fit for you to invite? Do you have like an Excel sheet with everyone? Is there a way you go about it?
That's a great question. I don't know. It's totally intuitive. It's totally just floating around there because it feels like it also feels like, neuronally, right? Like, mirror neurons and kind of across the universe, things match. And, this sort of idea of something is seeking you that you're seeking in that kind of general sort of sense that you feel it, right? And then it vibes. And then, and you feel that. In other words, I met Fred Roos, the late Fred Roos. He just passed recently, and I had met his son, Sandy, wonderful guy, and we'd really hit it off. And then Fred and I met at the Gagosian Academy Awards like a couple of years ago, and at Mr. Chow, Michael Chow's, and then I invited him for dinner, right? And we had a great night talking about art and about movies, and he accepted. And so my dear friend Issa and I, wonderful producer, took the two of them for dinner, right? And we had a wonderful dinner. And then from that dinner, he said, I want you to read something. It strikes me. There's a film I'm working on I want you to read. And he sent it to me. And then we started working on this film together, right? Now, he passed away. And what a beautiful, wonderful man that I was able to learn from because I was interested in his mind. I was fascinated in this guy who made The Godfather, Godfather 2. He worked on Godfather 1. He won the Academy Award for Godfather 2. He made Apocalypse Now. And I want to, and people who make beautiful things want to share about how that beauty came to be. When people are really interested in Grace&Grit, really interested, and I can feel it when they're trying to get to me or when they've seen it. I can tell the difference, because when you make it, you can tell the difference, right? And I think he sensed that. So he opened the doors for me and he was receptive for me. And that ultimately resulted in collaboration, which I did not expect, right? Which I did not expect, which was wonderful journey for me in terms of a lot of meetings and prep on a film and, writing and screen notes and shot lists and a number of things that I got to work with one of these greats, even though we didn't make a picture together. I was sort of mentored in some way, right? In a lot of ways, through that experience. Yeah. So I don't have a hit list like in terms of, a spreadsheet like where it's calculated. It's more intuitive. Like today I went to the gym, I go work out every day. And I was like, I got to go do this. And when I go to the gym, I never take my phone. My phone's always off, right? And I don't take it into the gym ever. That's my time to just do whatever I want to do, right? But I get in there and I end up running into all these wonderful people and this gentleman, a friend of mine named Lachlan. He's like, you got to come do gymnastics with me. So we're going to go in a couple of weeks and do gymnastics. One night I ran into Bobby Kennedy, is running for president today. And he and I have already, become friends in the last few years. And it's not about candidacy. It's not about, it's not about politics. Like that guy's amazing. He's impressive, like him or not. Everybody who's in the White House or touching the White House or all those things, they're all impressive people, like them or not, and he's impressive and he's brilliant. He's extraordinary and he's all those and controversial and divisive in a lot of ways, but also uniting in a lot of ways. And I ran into him today and that was wonderful, to see him. And what was ironic is that I had sent a message, to his campaign earlier about coordinating, something, and it's not about politics, it's about friendship, right? But I think that, where I'm going with that is that's the underlying thing with the Chinese theater. That's the underlying thing with, my mentorship with Fred. That's the underlying thing with me being on 100 magazine covers. That's the underlying thing with my relationship with Ken Wilber. And so then therefore, ultimately, Grace&Grit. That's the underlying thing with being able to find a distributor and see my first documentary film become profitable after many years. That it's about how can I show up? What can I give? What can I give? What can I give? Because then enough of that, the person on the other side of that who is self-made sees that and says, yeah. Here's the way. We're going to do this together. You're on it. Like, I get it. Like, how can I help you? Eventually that comes.
I love that, Sebastian. What's your thoughts on sort of building that community, that group of sort of close-knit friends? Like everyone's exposed to a TV show of Friends, the entourage, that group of 5, 6 friends that hang out every single day. But I've sort of always gone through life sort of without it, yet I'm sort of yearning for it. And I don't know if I'm yearning from it because I see these TV shows, but like a good example was I had a friend 6 months ago, was going through a tough time, broke up with had a breakup with his sort of partner of 2 years. Sort of now he's trying to rebuild a new friend group because, their friends are intermingled. So we were spending a lot of time together and, I was introducing him to a bunch of my friends. I met some of his running friends. And then over the period of the last 6 months, I sort of, this group formed. But, despite it forming from us being at the center, I felt not a part of it. And I had this realization that like, hey, this is actually my friends group. Like all his friends, they have his DNA. It was cool that I saw it go from nothing to this sort of new group of friends, but this is Ed's friends. They all have his DNA and no wonder I feel out of place when I'm there despite helping him build it. And I don't know, I'm sort of at a place where I've embraced sort of being on my own. I've embraced having a lot of satellite friends that have their own group of friends. I don't know if I'll ever have my own group of friends, but I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
What a beautiful and courageous question. And of all the things we're talking about today, I think probably something important to most audiences, right? On an intuitive level, that the feeling of not belonging is so powerful around the world and increasing exponentially. And the good news is that you are one of the individuals with a height or depth of intelligence and also a breadth of tenderness. Yeah. And that implies that you're going to be able to connect with anyone in a room if you're on one-to-one, right? Because you care, because you're interested, you're interested in the world. It also means that you're sensitive to the world, and so you're not going to be oftentimes comfortable in a group setting where it's on a flat level, on a superficial level. Not a bad level, but just not going so deep. I'm the same way. Ken Wilber's the same way. You know, like plenty of people want to connect with you, plenty of people want to connect with me, plenty of people want to connect with him. But it's about saying, wow, you're hitched your wagon, right, to a star, right? In other words, a spot in the distance from which your own light shines that you're being drawn to. And that means that when people are in line with that, you're going to be touching, you're going to be engaging with one another. And when it's not, you're not going to. And friends will fall by the wayside. And I've had many, many wonderful friends that we don't have much contact, but I still love and adore them, even from a distance. And maybe they come back into my life, and it happens in chapters sometimes. And I don't have a close-knit group that I see regularly, or speak to regularly. There are individuals, when I say regularly, it's done over months, and they're all very interesting, and eccentric, and I find them fascinating, that people that I want to learn from, that I respect, and I think when relationships are built on respect, that's the most important thing, respect and admiration, because affection comes easily with that, right? Versus the other way around. When individuals form relationships out of, affection only, and then they find out, well, I don't really like what this person's doing or how this person's treating someone else. Dangerous, right? And so I think that, to respond also specifically, Joseph Campbell, when he talks about the hero, right? And Joseph Campbell, someone who has influenced me and someone who I met, right, when I was a boy in Hawaii before I knew who he was, and then read his works later and became friends with his wife years later. And he talks about that, the hero, right? And the hero is the one who transmutes the chaos of the world into productivity, right? In other words, the hero is the one who walks through the forest alone and looks around and sees a path, and only you see that path, because it's no one else's path. It's only your path. And you say to everyone else, look at this path. And people are like, what are you talking about? All I see is darkness and trees. You have to go down that path, right? And you're going to be alone, because it wants to come out of you, wants to come out of me. It wants to come out of all of us. The beautiful thing is that we go down that path, and then all of a sudden it starts to connect with other paths, and far down the path, we find each other. Here we are today. How are you and I here today? How am I so woven together now with Ken Wilber's life? And you've interviewed him. How? And so, the sockeye salmon, you see them swimming alone in the stream, and they're all swimming upstream to spawn and die, right? But they're on that journey to swim upstream. You see those beautiful pictures of them like jumping, and the bear trying to catch them, and the hawk trying to catch them. And it looks so hardcore and lonely. And then they get to the top, and they're everywhere. They're all together, right? And what drew them there? What I started with. They're all hitched to the star. It's the stars that guide them to their destiny, if you will, to where they want to go, where they can smell that they must go. And you're on that, and so in that journey, you're not alone. Not only are you not alone, I would make a stance to say that it's the opposite, that the people like on Friends are alone, meaning that when people have just a superficial engagement in life, that's enough for some people, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But there's less texture, for you, and for many, and for myself, and for your audience. Individuals require a depth of texture, and a complexity of terrain. And so then therefore we are all together and alone in the morning and alone in the evening, and doing whatever we're doing, and whether it's paperwork or setting calls, we've got to feel like, what, I'm not in this alone. Like there's someone else out here doing this right now. Like Elon Musk was doing this when he was creating SpaceX. Like Sebastian's doing this right now. Even though he's successful, he's doing this right now. Someone else is struggling to do this. You know what? It's okay. That's the feeling of God, of spirit, right? That's the feeling of not having another presence necessarily of a human in the room, but having the presence of God, right, within us and through us, saying, okay, I go. Boy, and things show up.
I love that. I was just thinking, like, I haven't been sick in some time, that the last 3 days I just got hit with a flu, and man, the last 3 days I was just feeling so in doubt, sort of unsure, sort of lonely, craving that sort of outward sort of attention. And luckily today I woke up and I've sort of I'm past it, and I feel way so much better. But despite, I guess, the awareness, despite knowing what goes up must go down, those 3 days felt very dark. Like I wasn't that productive. I tried to push through. And today the sun is shining. I'm talking with you right now, Sebastian, and life feels really, really good. But then I know that this is going to sort of come to an end, and this is also temporary. But I guess maybe the answer is everything is in the now.
Well, I mean, to speak to that, right? Yes, certainly, like Khalil Gibran talks so much about, you're in the spring, but don't worry, winter's coming, right? You're in the winter, don't get too low, spring's coming. For sure, the sunrise, the sunset. Well, the sunrise and sunset's a great analogy, right? Because like nothing's really happening. Like the Earth's here and the sun is here, and like so it's just the sunrise and sunset from our POV, but you know, from the sun's POV, no difference, right? To the point, I think that there is something woven into the fabric of the cosmos that's cyclical, right? Whether it's the birth or death of a star, hence a supernova, of a planet, the in-breath, of the out-breath, of the sunrise, of the sundown, that indicates, yes, the texture and terrain are going to change. Sometimes it's going to be a little sweeter and there's going to be more honey. Sometimes it's going to be more salty and there will be a little more pain. From God's perspective, from the perspective of spirit, it's just texture. It's not good or bad, but us here now, it's like, wow, the salt in my tears, whew, it's salty, my sweat, my blood, you know, the ocean, it's like everywhere, right? For a reason, that it's supposed to be, right? That it's there. It's inescapable, right? It's in the moon, it's in the earth, it's in the cosmos, and we're made of that. So, what's being suggested there is that if we're made of that, we must embrace it. It's not about we want to or don't want to, like, but that's not part of us. We gotta sweat, we gotta cry, right? And I think that that's then a mark, yeah, of being so free and being so alive, right? To be able to sweat and to cry, yeah, and to yearn and to feel, in some ways like in the pain, right? Because in that moment we're bound together, right, with all these other sentient beings that feel that pain, but also evolutionarily in terms of not the perpetuation of not just our species, but all consciousness, if you will. Pain ties us to one another, right? It opens up our compassion. If someone's not capable of feeling pain, they're not capable of feeling compassion, right? They become sociopathic, right? And so the ability to feel pain is the ability to feel like, wow, I feel this pain. Now I can imagine what you feel like too, potentially, because I know what that feels like. But I have to feel it first to know what you feel like, or to be able to imagine what you feel like. And so I try to think of it, as a gift. That doesn't make it easier, right? But it at least makes it spiritual. It at least allows it to be soulful. I think on another level, pragmatically, I think it's important to push ourselves to uncomfortable places because discomfort's going to happen no matter what. And instead of waiting for it to show up, when we push ourselves to uncomfortable places, it's better, breakthroughs happen then more often than not, right?
Sebastian, you're most likely probably going to be the go-to person for people in your circle when they have sort of qualms that they're trying to sort of get clarity on. What do you do when you sort of are in that sort of spot where you are unsure? Do you have mentors that you reach out to? Do you sort of take a step back and try to figure it out in solitude and listen to yourself? What have you found worked the best?
What a beautiful question. Solitude, definitely. Thinking, but not like too much mapping, more feeling, thinking, exercise, like running through the basics of physiology on one level. So sweat, heat, cool, whether it's hot shower, cold shower, sun, dark, rain, wherever you are, whatever you're embracing, snow, heat. Obviously, I'm in the sun all the time, right? I like the intensity of that. When it's dark out, I like that intensity. That's one aspect of it, the physical component of it. And then emotionally allowing feeling like, what am I really feeling here? What am I really feeling here? Well, anxiety means putting something off. That's sort of kind of, if we're going to give anxiety a definition, it means I'm not paying attention to something. So what is it that I can pay attention to that will help me reduce anxiety? Is it a relationship? Is it something I need to do for my own work or my own creation? The relationship, is it because I'm trying too hard to hold on to it? Maybe I need to let that relationship go or just allow it or just tell the person how much I care for them, but it's up to them, surrender in so many ways. The work thing, do I really need to do it? Is it something I really want to do? Should I just do it? Or maybe is it something I should just let go of and not do, you know? And then that really is helpful. So that's the physical, right? And the mental, feeling the angst. And then, you know, there are go-tos in terms of consuming content, right? So I like to read. James Hollis, for me, fantastic. At night, you know, if I read a little bit, and I'm right now I'm reading him, and I always go back to him. Alan Watts a lot, Ken Wilber, right now James Hollis speaking to me, and he's brilliant. I've read most of all his stuff, and it's reiterated most of his stuff in a lot of different ways, but always spectacular. That it gives a sense to hear someone else say something with a certain vernacular and a complexity that helps us feel seen and heard. That we hear the words from someone else's lips in a certain way that articulates our own thoughts or feelings that help us feel like, okay, it's okay, right? And so I think with Hollis, I'm reading right now. I've got this book over there by my bedside, Mythologems, and then What Matters Most, and is an incredible book. And Meaning in the Second Half of Life, I think, is another book. And I mean, they're all wonderful. He's just so powerful as a Jungian analyst and writer, and so that gives me solace for sure. You know, I'm very intellectual, as I think you are probably, and so the reading soothes me because it allows me to make sense of something that is so ethereal, meaning this life and this existence and the pain of this world. So the physicality, you know, identifying the anxiety and working through the whys and the whats, and trying to really see specifically the anxieties, and then the reading and the consuming of content to be able to make sense of this, you know, of man's, you know, human sentient struggle and pain, and what is that? And I think, you know, bearing witness to the plight of what it is to evolve and to be human is very helpful, yeah, for us. And most people don't want to read, you know, they want to see a movie, and that's fine. But if you're going to choose a movie that's going to rock you, unsettle you. Don't choose a movie that's going to distract you, because then you got to come back and still address all these things, right? But if we choose a movie that rocks us, sometimes it generates, whew, that was rocked me a little bit. What is that?
You talked about sort of being seen, and recently, I guess this year, I discovered that, wow, like being seen is something I crave. And I noticed that I do have, or I try to do a good job of making other people feel seen. But often I'm in a scenario where I could be in a room filled with people and I'm working the room, saying hi to everyone, introducing myself to people, and I'd leave feeling invisible. Leaving felt like I was like invisible in a group filled with people, despite talking to everyone, despite getting to know everyone. And I guess the current conclusion I'm currently sitting on, it's, you know, it's okay. I guess that may be my superpower. And I have to learn how to see myself and not rely on being seen by others. That's the current conclusion I'm at, but I'd love to get your thoughts, Sebastian.
It's beautiful you brought that up, and I'm so glad you did, because I've got a great response for anyone who feels that way. Okay, and it's this. It's very simple too. I do the exact opposite, right? And after experiencing exactly what you're describing, when I had a home in Century City, I used to host these martini parties and sake tasting parties and piano concert, and I'd have 70 people in my home. And I wanted to make everyone happy and feel like everyone was engaged and got a minute with me. And then at the end of the night, I was just exhausted and lonely and empty, you know, and I didn't feel like I did anything. And I like to go into a room and just feel and connect with one person, whoever's right there in the moment, and just say, like, and not, you know, just, whoa, that's a cool jacket, if I really feel that way. Or what did you think about blank and blank that happened today, the moon or whatever the thing is? And then if it goes, then vibe, and then go as deep as possible and hold the eye contact. Second step, breathe the person in, really listen, really feel. And then, wow, people want to share. And then when people feel that, they feel seen, and then they want to know, then they want to hear you. And then all of a sudden, 2 hours goes by and the party's over, and you've only spoken with one person. But man, you've made a friend for life.
I love that. I'm definitely gonna try
I
doing the
mean,
opposite.
that's what I do, and because exactly what you're saying. It's so vapid, you know, to walk in somewhere and feel like we need to talk with everybody, speak with everybody, listen to everybody, you know. But if we are just engaged right here, right now, and it's the same thing I do when I exercise. People know me. I go to any gym in the world, no question. I say hi to everybody, you know, but I'm there to do my thing. And if somebody's next to me, I invite people, come join me, join me, join me. And we push it to the limit. Most people, it's horrible, because I want to kill myself every day I'm down there. I push the absolute limit. But it's about just being in this thing, It's not about, in this case, exercise. It's not about who's athletic and who's not. It's just who wants to dive in with their whole heart. Same thing socially in a conversation. Who wants to dive in? Is it the waiter? Is it the person at the valet? Is it the person who's the president, who's the head of the company? You know, Elon Musk and I had dinner twice at Lynn and Norman Lear's house years ago before anyone knew who he was. I didn't know who he was. And we were seated together. It was a small dinner. No one wanted to talk to him, particularly. I mean, everyone there was doing something in the world that was interesting. And he and I hit it off. I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm putting a rocket on Mars." And I said, "That's cool, man." He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm making this film, to adapt it from a book by Ken Wilber called Grace&Grit." Yeah, of course, Ken Wilber. And he was fascinated with what I was doing, and I was fascinated with what he was doing. And if he had gone out, and talked with anyone else, I'm putting a rocket on Mars, at that juncture, people would have been like, "Well, all right, that's boring." Now he's unmeetable. You can't get in touch with the guy. But to the point, the world is mysterious. It's so mysterious. And if we follow that mystery without trying to calculate it in our little heads, it opens up, because there's not just one path, there's unlimited paths. And if we surrender to that, boy, the miracle is us, and it is the other, and it is this thing, and we're flowing as an aspect of all that. So to the point, I think it's like really getting lost in the thing. I've seen other people who do that as well, and I've seen their worlds, like how their lives are. One of them is a dear friend of mine, Frances Fisher, who was in my first documentary and is in Grace&Grit, obviously. She was the mother in Titanic. She's one of the greatest actresses of all time. And I see her, and she's the same. And that's how we became friends. We met, I think, through Marianne Williamson, who's also running for president, also a dear friend of mine, also an unbelievable, speaker. Disagree on many things, but I'm in awe of her. She's a pretty impressive person. And I see Frances, and she and I got in a conversation, I think, at one of the Marianne, this time years ago, 15 years ago. Marianne was a speaker at the Saban Theater in LA at the time. She was doing Course in Miracles, or long before politics. And Frances and I got in a conversation. And then by the end of the night, we were great friends. And I didn't know who she was, and she didn't know who I was. And the next thing you know, man, we shoot a documentary together. We shoot Grace&Grit together. Next thing you know, she's coming to my premiere at the Chinese Theater IMAX. Next thing I know, Marianne's flying to Sedona to speak on stage with me at the opening of my first doc, at the opening of Grace&Grit in Sedona, meaning I got lost in it, and it opened up. It opened up. Everybody wins.
Given that now you do the opposite, do you still host dinners at your house? Do you still bring people together? Do you now do it in small amounts do you do one-on-ones only, small groups of 5s, 10s, or do you still do the 70? How has that changed how you sort of do home get-togethers?
Yeah, I don't do large groups anymore. Small. I like 2 people, 3 people, the most. Sometimes 4, but really very rarely though. Usually 1 person, 2 people, 3 people. There's a couple filmmakers, these 2 guys couple, and they came by not too long ago, a few months ago, and they have a series, and I invited them by, to come again at some juncture, and they invite me to everything that they're doing around their series. Wonderful, and really we were not too familiar with each other, but I said, "Man, what you guys are doing is beautiful. You want to come by?" And I don't, we'll probably collaborate. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Doesn't matter. But I like it. Like I'm seeing what they're doing, and they're glued to something, and they're focused on what they want to do, and they're putting it out in the world. And there's a lot to be learned from that, just through osmosis, just through being in the room and asking questions. And so they came over, we hit it off, and they love the stuff that I put out on Instagram. That he told me the other night that when he had an event, I think at his home a couple months ago. So at my place, no, 1 or 2 people, oftentimes out, that I like to differentiate now, but it also could be my living situation is a little different now. I have a house in Santa Monica. I used to have a condo that overlooked the whole city in Century City, and that was great for entertaining with, security and ballet and all this type of thing. And now, my house is also my office. And so I, I had a couple guys recently who I brought up earlier to explore sort of film and health brands. I've arranged a section of my home on the roof. It's like an office. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. But I find that I'm not, to answer the question, I find that I don't host that often. I like to engage things sometimes with activity also. Like, let's do a movie night, right? 3, 4 people, maybe, right? Let's bicycle down the coast, maybe 2 people, 3 people, you know. Let's watch the debates were on the other night. It doesn't matter politics, but somebody said, do you want to come to this? And I said, sure. It's a small group, 5 people. I'm not so interested in the debates, but I'm interested in the psychology and what's happening in the world stage. And I'm interested in hearing how other people perceive what's happening. The connection with the individuals is what's important to me. So I pick and choose, kind of around that. Like, where can I offer, something that's going to be of interest to someone else, and where can I learn? And that tends to be smaller groups.
And when you say 2, 3 people, that's excluding yourself, right? Or is that including you?
Oh, including. So
Oh,
one other person, 2 other people,
got it.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, depth, people will share things when we're open and we're interested, right? And we're in each other's presence. People will share amazing things with people they don't know that well if they feel safe, and I help people feel safe because people are safe with me, you know, I and I want to feel safe with people, and I'm comfortable being vulnerable. And so I think people feel that also. And that's nice, and I like that. And that's worth the price of admission, meaning however, whatever the time is. Whereas as soon as it's 2, 3 people, in other words, 4 people total, people are less likely to volunteer. There's a posturing, and I want to get to the core of what's really going on versus what's happening, right? What's happening is the plot. What's really going on is the theme underneath, and that interests me enormously, and so I like that. Not everybody likes that. So for me, yeah, small groups for sure.
As I'm sort of running through my head of people that I would love to spend one-on-one time with, like not many, comes to mind. It's sort of I'm like down to maybe 5, 6 sort of people, and if I run through those 5, 6 people, it would be too much for them if I hung out with them every 2, 3 weeks. So I'd probably spread them out throughout the year, and then I guess that's catching up with one person every 2 months. So I have a lot of in between time where I'm just on my own. I guess I could reach out to some of those people to see if some of them would want to hang out much, much more often. But it feels like I'm constantly having to sort of restrain myself from being too much. Like, Sebastian wouldn't like if I'm messaging him every day, sending him photos, sending him thoughts. That would be too much. Like, I'm going to drive him away. What's your thoughts on that? Is that sort of negative self talk? Is there validity behind that? Is it, yeah, what should I be? Is there a right way to do it? Yeah.
Great question that I think is an important question for so many people. And I think that it comes back to also the thing of like, is the impulse to say, how can I contribute? Right? Because I ask myself, if the impulse is to say, how can I contribute? Then there's always a reason. Everybody wants their life to be contributed to. I mean, when I developed a relationship with James Hollis or Ken Wilber, et cetera, it was like, how can I contribute? So they were always taking my call, and my response, because they were like, dude, this guy just wants to help. You know what I mean? And that really came to me, I must say that many, 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 many years ago, when I fell in love with Alan Watts and I listened to everything he'd ever recorded and read every book he'd ever written, he was dead, right? And so I thought, wow, he lived on a boat in Sausa houseboat in Sausalito, California. If he was alive, I would go to his dock and I would be there every day. And when he comes off the dock, I said, listen, I'm going to scrub barnacles off the bottom of your boat if I have to, but I'm going to spend time with you. But right now, I'm just going to scrub barnacles off the bottom of your boat. And what would he say to that? Okay. And then eventually he'd see me scrubbing barnacles off the bottom of his boat every day. And he'd be like, well, all right, this guy's pretty cool. Let's invite him up for tea. And then who knows what happens. And so that's the way I went about it with Ken Wilber, really, I was like, wow, this guy, bright light. How can I contribute? How can I contribute? How can I contribute? And then eventually I found a way. And so I think that going about it right in that way is what's important, that you think there's people in your life, whatever city you're in. And I know you travel. When you're in that city, you reach out to someone before you go. And then again and again and again, you say, hey, listen, there's this cool art show going on. right? And let's go. Let's go at 5 p.m. on this date. Does that work for you? You know, let me invite you for dinner, whatever. Let's just go to the show and and discuss it. You know, it looks interesting. Because it's not really about the art, right? It's about you go with the person and then you're standing next to each other and you're looking at something. And then you have an idea about something that strikes you intellectually or emotionally or humorously. And so do they. And then you share and you get to know each other through that experience. And that's nice. You know, it's fresh. And people like to do new things. People like to be invited to something if it's clear. Yeah. And if it's simple. I don't think people like, you know, people who are distracted want things that are more distracting because they feel like it's going to cure their distraction, but it just gets worse. They want to go to every party and be in all the things, you know, and it's like it's exhausting. But people who want connection, and you say, hey, people have invited me to things like just one-on-one, or a couple people smoking in this thing. I mean, let's do it, you know, like they're interesting. You know, when I find that when I invite people like that people are responsive, you know, no matter who they are, you know, like at the highest level.
I think that tracks because when I was sort of just inviting people to these group settings, there was a lower sort of acceptance rate because it's not sort of that one-on-one intentioned sort of invite. Another question I'd love to get your thoughts on, Sebastian, is, you know, I've always thought that, you know, finding a soulmate, you know, I'd love to find someone that I can spend every day talking to, and we're just infinitely fascinated, and we'd have to sort of, you know, force ourselves to jump off the phone call to get some rest. And it's just this never ending fascination, and we can just talk on hours and hours and hours. Is that real? Can that sort of exist? Or do I need to learn to love myself and learn to not need, you know, an external sort of source to communicate, and get to a point where if I don't have that person to talk to, I'm fine?
Wow. I love the way you asked that because it's so telling and I appreciate it so much, you know, in the way that you're an intellectual and you're also very disciplined, right? And those are powerful things. I mean, just those two things alone, like, yeah, that's the odds of success right there. But that's hard in relationship to be intellectual and disciplined because we can't do that in relationship like we can on some levels, you know, self-recognition and realization and interpretation and understanding maps and alignment and all those things. But I think of it, you know, in this way, like in the same way of getting lost at the party by just talking to one person, right? That we cultivate a way of being with each other. And if we cultivate that as much as we can every day, right? You know, that I'm earlier today exercising and I'm talking with somebody who I don't know, I've never met before. And he says hello and he asks me something and I respond. And the next thing you know, we're talking a little bit and we have eye contact and I feel like, you know, and I ask, you know, who he is and what he's, you know, whatever. We talk a little, we establish rapport. That I'm trying to get lost in that, you know, that so then the more I do that, the more I start to feel at home in everybody's eyes. In other words, the greater number of soulmates than there are for me, potentially. And also the greater number of individuals who are finding that in me, right? So that when you come into contact with someone who there's a chemistry and an alignment and all those other things, it's not up here. It's just hello again. It's just like the person yesterday that was a few minutes that I'll never see again, probably, right? But it's just that presence of getting lost in it. You know, in other words, I think we have to be, in other words, you know, we don't deposit or withdraw love from a relationship, right? Love is this stream and we drop into it. And when we drop into it, we're in it. And it's an exercise to stay in it, to love ourselves. It's an exercise. It's very easy in this world to be self-loathing, you know? It's very easy. Like it's so hard. This world's so hard, you know, and to acknowledge that is, you know, a really powerful step and say, I'm gonna be tender and compassionate with myself. It's okay to feel devastated and hopeless. Okay, now I'm just gonna do something. I'm gonna make a shake, you know, have some tea, you know. Okay, good. Make the bed, you know, move forward, you know. And when I see someone, the first person I see them, I'm gonna make them, if I can, help them feel good, you know. And I leave my place. I see this guy and he's painting a mural in Santa Monica on a wall, and I pull over and I take a minute and I really look at it. I'm not just giving a compliment. I look at it and I think, God, it's beautiful. And I say, hey, I said, that is so beautiful. And he says, oh, thank you, man. I've been working like he's been working a month on it. You know, I didn't even know. And next thing you know, we're friends. And yesterday, I'm driving and I had this kind of altercation at some point with someone who I'm close with, and I felt the person was being very unreasonable and close-minded. But whatever, I surrendered to it. If this person wants to be in my life, great. If not, that's fine too. That's how we have to be. The love is there, but never, ever, ever force, allow. And I pulled out onto the street, yeah, and it's a busy two-way street. And I look across the street and I see this woman, and she's, I don't know, in her early 50s or something like this. And there's a guy, and she's walking in front of her partner, and he's a man, and he's like in, I don't know, in his late 50s or something like this, and he's following behind her. And then he puts his arms around her, right? And they're on the other side of the other direction of the street. And he puts his arms around and he whispers something in her ear, and I can tell like there's some sort of altercation. He's trying to mend it, is what it appears. And then she's like, okay. And then he's like really kissing her ear. And I couldn't help it. I roll down the window and I yell across the street. I go, hey, that's a beautiful man. I say, you keep him. I go, that's a wonderful man. And then, they light up and they're sort of embarrassed and excited. And everyone in traffic is kind of looking at me. And then she looks over and she goes, okay, yeah, he's okay. And then there's this playfulness, in other words, and then I'm so happy after that. I'm almost teary-eyed. I'm so happy, right? And as I was driving forward and the light turned green and I'd gone, I was thinking, why am I teary-eyed and why am I emotionally responsive to that, right? Because it's like I've let God through, right? In other words, God, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, this energy of the cosmos, it wants to identify beauty. It seeks to identify beauty. One of the ways it does that is through gratitude. One of the ways it does that is just by saying, that's beautiful. It's like your impulse when you're with someone to stand and look at the sundown or the sunrise or a rainbow and you go, God, that's so beautiful. And it's almost like you're not saying enough. You can only say it so many times, right? Because it's ineffable. Again and again and again and again. The world wants that. God wants that, right? The cosmos wants that. And I felt emotional afterwards in a very satisfying way. And I thought, that's so cool, like I'm such a romantic, when I saw that couple and they made my day. I probably was a benefit to their day too. And there might have been someone in traffic behind me, ahead of me, beside me. Everybody was looking over, who's this guy yelling stuff out of his window, and they probably were like, yeah, that's cool. Right? That's cool. In other words, we give each other permission in the world, people we know and that we don't know, to be enthusiastic, to recognize beauty. And that's I think fundamental to engaging, in terms of finding soulmate, it's finding mate through the soul of the world, through ourself. It's not finding another individual. The individuals are going to show up, right? Regardless, inevitably, for sure. Never how we expect, but it's allowing just that grace and gratitude and being able to see as much beauty as possible and identify it when we see it, And then it invites that in. It invites that in. The more we are able to see it, the more we're like doing sort of spiritual ophthalmology, like, Zen, if you will, right? Allowing, the beauty, and it's like a muscle. And then and then all of a sudden there's like all these soulmates around. Comes and goes, and then there's no final solution,
Interesting. So like, Sebastian, you definitely have the ability to sort of make people feel seen. Like as I'm asking questions, you're listening, you're sort of complimenting my question and you're making me feel so seen. And just those stories that you shared, going through life, I feel like, for every 100 people I say hi to and have those small interactions with, for an example, I was walking by my local park and there was this sort of homeless person just sleeping outside of the toilet in the park, and people were just walking by, sort of making them feel invisible. I was like, let me just go up and say hi and learn why they're here, what situation they're in, and let me just make them feel seen. And, it was nice having that conversation, hearing their story, and, I continued my walk and it felt nice. But I guess, I'd like someone to walk up to me and say, hey, why the long face? I'd love someone to come up to me. But I do realize that, one in every 100 people I say hi to, I get shocked by this turning of the table, like, hey, what about you? I'm like, oh, this person is cool. And I guess my hit rate is getting higher where I am slowly attracting more and more of the people that can turn the table, that can be like, thank you for asking, but tell me a bit about yourself, and sort of can reflect that interest. Yeah, like the 99 people to get to that one, maybe it's a numbers game, but I do feel like the 99, as much I enjoy sort of, talking to people, getting to know their story, it does sort of chip away at my life force, it feels like, and the one that I do find, that is a conversation and that is a sort of relationship where it does feel it's so neutral and I'm not sort of giving away parts of myself.
Well, that's beautiful. So first, from an integral perspective, let's say it's 1 in 100, right? That's what you're aware of. Like somebody might have gone home, bawled their eyes out, wanted to commit suicide, but because you had eye contact with them and said, "Hey, how you doing?" And they were like in shock and they were like, "What's going on?" Because they felt so invisible. They weren't used to that. Maybe they've been abused and maybe who knows? And then maybe everyone's telling them how horrible they are at work and they go home and maybe they're like, wow, that guy was so gentle and his eyes were so caring. That's saving a life. That's powerful. Never, ever, ever let anyone take that from you. I mean, that's like, the most godly thing. It's so important too, because, the fear, right, for people to connect is huge. People are afraid of being rejected and not feel seen, For sure. Yeah. When I did a lot of growing up in Hawaii, everybody says hello, right? Like you walk down the street and you say hello, and people are like, "Hi, how's it?" You know what I mean? Like I'm walking in the airport in Hawaii a few years ago, and my flight's delayed, and the airport's empty. It's indoor, outdoor, and I see this guy and he's working, and it's 8 o'clock at night. He's on a ladder, and I'm like watching him work. I'm just walking around waiting for my flight, and I'm watching him. He looks over, and I'm like, and he's like, "Hey." You know what I mean? Like he sees me seeing him, and it's awesome, and he gets it, right? So then I come to California, you know, and it's like, hey, and people are like, why's the person looking at me? Right? And so you cannot let anyone steal that from you. Like if they're missing out, let them miss out. Maybe you're the bodhisattva and you wake someone up and you help them feel seen. Maybe you don't. The price of that is to feel the pain of that, and it hurts and it sucks. But it's important. Because if you don't carry that torch, who's gonna? If someone as smart and tender as you is not going to carry that torch, who's going to carry it? I'm not going to carry that torch. It's up to you. It's up to me. In other words, it's up to whoever's listening who carries that torch that knows how tender they are to say hello to the stranger on the street. Always, and two things. One is I was doing this program at LA County Probation with incarcerated youth, right? And some, in for everything, and these kids are like 12 to 18 or 19 if they're holdover, and the recidivation rate is high, like 70%. And one of these, I was learning something every time, trying to instill hope in this sort of hopeless environment in a lot of ways. And so many people doing wonderful programs there. And I was doing a program there. It's because like you ever save someone's life, meaning like stop someone from jumping off a bridge, right? And I said, well, I have a friend, Kevin Briggs, who did a TED talk on that, and he used to he was highway patrol or police, and he would see people like trying to jump off the in San Francisco the bridge, and he would stop them, and he did a TED talk on it. It's beautiful, it's wonderful. And I said, but where it happens most often is not actually stopping someone from overdosing or jumping off a bridge. It's in helping someone feel seen. That's it. And it happens on the day that we never know. What you said about the homeless guy, that's right on target, right? And I had a similar experience a few days ago. I was in Venice, and there was a guy, and he was on the side of the road, and it was like this small neighborhood. And, he was like doing something, and he had these nice eyes, and I pulled over and I said, hey, hey. And I had this t-shirt, a fresh t-shirt. And I pulled over and I said, hey, what's your name? And he said, Jonathan. And I said, hey, Jonathan. I said, you've got such beautiful eyes, And he said, yeah. Like, just like no one's ever told him that, right? And he just lit up and he was like, and I was like, I'm Sebastian. He was like, hey, Sebastian. I was like, I have this t-shirt and I don't want to insult you, but it's like really cool t-shirt, but it doesn't fit me and it's fresh. Would you like it? You know, it's cool. You can let me know. And he goes, yeah. And I gave it to him. And I said, man, you're like handsome guy, you know? Like you've got this light coming out of you. And he was like, thanks, Sebastian. And I was like, yeah, thank you, man. That was it. Never see him again, just like your guy. You know, and maybe he's thinking about that right now, the guy that you spoke to, right? But moreover, also from an integral perspective, who's the beneficiary there? It's not me saving him. It's God saving God. Yeah, in other words, it's the perpetuation of consciousness in life, meaning that there's recognition through him and through me. I'm aware of me and I'm somewhat aware of him, right? He's aware of him and somewhat aware of me. That's pretty cool, man. That's mystical, right? That's a miracle, right? I want to keep that going. And if that's with the person in my life who's going to be the soulmate, the person I'm going to go to bed with and wake up with, great. But if they're not having it, I'll have it with that homeless person, you know, that crazy. But like I'm having that, you know, in other words, the position is to take the long way home. You're having that no matter what, and you're carrying that torch. I'm having that no matter what. I'm having the mystical journey no matter what. And if people want that, that's what they're going to find, right? In my world. And that's what I'm going to deliver in their world. You know, I'm here in service to something greater, you know.
What you just shared reminds me of Spider-Man. You know, with great power comes great responsibility. And I don't know, I've seen a lot of Spider-Man comics. Like Spider-Man, he's having it tough. Like he's lonely, not seen, invisible. Everyone's hating him, but he still saves everyone despite all that.
You know, and that Joseph Campbell, you know, way, and you know, all the movies like Spider-Man and Batman and Superman and Star Wars and the Knights of the Round Table and King Arthur. You know, the hero is the one who takes the misery out of life, you know, and transmutes that into joy, into grace, you know, that transmutes chaos into productivity. You know, that's the hero. And so we aren't not, it's not that we're the hero or not the hero. We decide that every day with every action that we engage in. You know, am I going to transmute this into something beautiful? And when you went and said hello to that guy living on the street, you're the hero. You know, it's so fundamental. Keep being the hero. And does it hurt? Does Spider-Man alone? Right? You know, it's Batman alone. Yeah, it hurts. Sucks. It's okay. Rather be that. Like, what's the other option? You're the villain, right? You know, and the difference between the hero is and the villain is that the villain is someone who was hurt early on, has a scar, doesn't want to feel it anymore, wants to take it out on the world, right? The hero is the one's hurt early on, has a scar, doesn't want anyone else to feel that way, and wants to heal the world, wants to love the world, wants to protect the world, wants to care for the world. You know, in other words, the hero's compassionate, right? And the villain's angry. And so we decide every day, are we the hero, you know, or are we the villain?
I love that. Sebastian, how do you go about sort of maintaining your energy? Like I realized that prior to getting sick, last week I went out on like a whole Wednesday morning till night and had a Friday night for a friend's birthday dinner, and I'm pretty sure like those probably catalyzed me to just crashing 3 days prior. Yeah, how do you go about maintaining your energy, especially sort of being in your field of work where you're constantly going out each night or meeting people, meeting new people, a lot of one-on-ones. How do you maintain your energy?
That's a great question. I don't go out very often. I'm really a homebody. My morning is usually creative at home, alone. My evenings are mostly alone. But if I go, I want to really go. I want to give it all. You know, I want to be engaged. I want to feel my best. I want to look my best. I take care of myself. To do that, I prepare for it. And if I don't feel like I can show up in a way that really contributes, then I don't go. And I don't go most of the time. But if I go, I want to deliver. Joy, connection, are the things that I want to deliver. Grace, depth. Energy wise, though, you know, just on a basic level, I like the sun, obviously. I also like the cold. So if I'm in a cold place, I like New York, something like that. I like Chicago, the snow, wonderful. Touch it, feel it, be in it, feel the cold, go for a 3-mile walk in the morning, in the evening. In California, it's hot right now. I go outside for a little bicycle ride or the heat. I want to feel the intensity of the sun. Outside of that, hot shower, cold shower, or sauna, ice bath, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Those things, I like the extremes, in other words, those things are, I think, woven into the cosmos, from early on, like even in the formation of the earth, right? The sun comes out, the earth rotates, and automatically you see how the molecules respond to the sun in the morning. Right? You see the plants respond, right? We see the reef respond and the plankton respond. I have on my roof these beautiful, beautiful succulents, and they open sometimes during the year every morning, right? These beautiful purple flowers, and every evening at sunset they close. It's like the craziest thing. It's so beautiful, and I look at those guys, and I never noticed it, and I planted them up there, and and I'm like, wow, that's so cool. Like they're doing that, they're conscious. There's consciousness there, right? That's so spectacular. I got to do the same thing. In other words, I got to respond to the basics, right? The sunshine. That's one. The next is I definitely get energy from reading, even if it's just a little bit, a couple pages in the evening before bed. That's a more often than not staple for me because it sets primes my subconscious. When I sleep, I feel hopeful. It's important because, if we don't drive our mind with direction, it tends to spin off, right? Even just a page or two, Sometimes we get lost and you read a ton. We get energy from engagement in the world. Right. And I think that's the biggest, misconception, particularly in the West. It's not that we have energy and then we go work out. It's the other way around. We don't have energy, we go exercise, and then afterwards we feel full of energy. And it's like that 99.999% of the time, right? And that's been a staple for me, since as long as I can remember, even whether it was just sort of feeling anxiety or something as a kid and saying, I'm gonna go exercise. It doesn't matter, the gym, outside, running, climbing, hiking, sprinting, whatever the thing is. Wow, afterwards, the endorphins, the serotonin, man, I feel good. It's gonna be okay. I can handle this thing. And so it stays with me today. Even today, I was lethargic before I went to go exercise. And I went to go exercise and it was hard first, started. And the next thing you know, I'm happy. Next thing you know, I'm happy. I'm not over, about the routine, what I'm going to do, but I just do it. Sometimes more, sometimes I get the gold medal, sometimes less, but I do it and I stay in it. So that's a very, those staples. And then I would say food wise, like I drink a lot of water, sometimes tea. Coffee agrees with some people, not so much with me. I love the smell, decaf, cold, usually. But I don't like too much caffeine. It makes me tired. It puts me over the top. I like liquid foods, like I like to make a shake. I like to eat light salads, vegetables, easy to digest. If I eat heavy meals, I definitely feel lethargic and tired afterwards, so I try to, vegetables agree with me a lot. So I don't eat too many meals in a day. I don't overthink it, but nutrient dense, calorie sparse. Yeah, and if I'm like heading to a meeting or something like that, something important, I need to be at my best to prepare something. Always jumping in a shower is great, or jumping in a pool or jumping in a body of water. I mean, it's interesting, mythically how, sort of resurrection and baptism and the return to the ocean mythically in movies, right? So it's powerful, like, emotionally, just being underwater, whether it's cold or hot or both. It's good, it's helpful. So those are, I think for energy, those are mine.
I love that, Sebastian. One health related question, since we're on the topic of health. Another rabbit hole I've been digging into over the last 6, 7 months is I've been seeing all this content about, sunscreen being bad, tap water, chlorine bad, fluoride in toothpaste is sort of bad, seed oils you should avoid. And at this point, it feels like the world is just trying to kill everyone and give everyone cancer. Given that you're so in depth within the health space, do all these things actually matter? Do they cause cancer, or should people just be focused on just being happy and that's going to allow them to live much longer than avoiding seed oils?
Probably the second, I mean, there's first off, I think online there's so much amazing content out there, right? There are a lot of people selling things, and I see a lot of really intelligent people sell out because they're selling something. And people will oftentimes send me, what do you think about this product? And I look at the person and I say, well, I don't know. How does the person look to you? Do you want to look like that person? Feel like that person? Do you like what you see? They're like, no, but they make sense. And I'm like, well, okay, I don't know. You listen to someone like Barbara O'Neill, and I don't know, she's in her early 70s or something, and she's had a bunch of kids. I don't know, 5 or 10 kids. I don't know. Popped them all out easily. It was a very controversial figure because she's very pro-choice with medicines, and she exploded during the shutdown. They're fascinating, It doesn't mean that everything she says is right, but she seems to be really doing it and living it. And I learn a lot, from a lot of people, right, online. I tend to be conservative when it comes to, trying things that are new and all those. I mean, I think that, I had a lot of blueberries this morning, right? My shake and cocoa. I have a water filter at my house, drink a lot of water. I don't like a lot of processed foods. I don't use sunblock. Um, Probably I'm not right on that. I'm not here to debate anybody on it. A lot of people really like, are evangelical about it. But I saw growing up people, I saw Jack Lord, who used to be on the old Hawaii Five-O, running in the beach every evening in Hawaii when I was a boy, and I'd see him in the sun and he was tan, and I was like, do you use sunblock? He was like, no. And I would see other people like that, older women and men, like in their 70s, 80s, 90s. And I started to just take notes. And they would say, like, if you run on cement too long, your knees are going to fall apart. And I would say, okay, I'm not going to do that. And then they would say, like, I use almond oil on my skin. And I would see this guy, and he was like in his 80s and the most beautiful skin. He was always tan. And I was like, what do you use? And he's like, almond oil. I was like, where do you get it? He's like, I just make my own special blend. You know what I mean? I have another friend of mine. He's 81. His name's Boyd. Well, a beautiful guy. Unbelievable. Looks incredible. He's got so much energy. He's always naked in the sun every day. He says, he's in the sauna a little bit, ice bath a little bit, works really hard. He's a little bit outside in the sun, no sunblock. So I like it, agrees with me. Am I right about it? I'm not saying I am. I'm not here to debate anybody on it, but that's for me. I like it. But if I lived in another culture, probably I'd be on the snow more. And I must say, though, that I have friends who are Ukrainian or Russian or from cold climates, and their skin is amazing. And I think, wow, there's something there evolutionarily, right? Like Eskimos, like being in the cold, like maybe it brings out this, something in the skin that is also fantastic valid. So when I started going in the ice bath, I built my house, I started putting my head under because I thought, it can't hurt. It's challenging, something fun to do. Hawaiians, Asians, and Polynesians, their hair, amazing, right? Like amazing, like amazing. What's happening there? The fish, the vegetables, the fats, right? And coconut and so I tend to follow that as my guide, those things, right? I also say, like, what's your heritage?
Vietnamese.
Yeah, I mean, like your culture, it's amazing. Like you guys, Polynesians, Vietnamese, Filipinos, like Thai, like you guys live forever. Like no problem. Like it's amazing, right? It's amazing. So what's happening there? And then I look at the culture and it's like, wow, so gentle, so kind. Yeah. And I say, it's something there, man. I'm gonna be gentle and kind. That's what's most important, right? Yeah.
I love that, Sebastian. We could talk forever. I want to be respectful of your time. Last two questions I usually wrap up these podcasts with. One, any recent discoveries that you have implemented to your life?
Recent discoveries that I've implemented into my life. I started putting out this series on Instagram and on X, and it's every other day. And it's a couple, 3 minutes or something like that. And I'm going every kind of month with a new theme. And it's about love, relationship, health, success, God, psychology, philosophy. And as usual, the more I work on it, the better I get at it. Meaning, the more I work on it, the more I study, the more I'm growing, that I'm learning, that I'm the beneficiary. I work things out. We all work things out. We mold and shape our consciousness through discussion and through engagement. It's okay to be alone for a week, a month, as long as we're alone. Like it's okay. Like a lot of people doing that, right? It's important once in a while to engage culturally with a group of people because we shape our ideas from listening and talking and sharing. and hence, your vernacular is complex and robust because of all the people you interview and share your ideas with and consume their ideas and share content with. So I think that the thing that I've brought into my life, I'd say most recently, is just that format has been new to me. I've been reluctant to do that for many years. I've done long form content like feature films and documentary films and books and writing that I prepare for an enormous amount of time and edit. And so that this challenge to be able to deliver something in shorter terms, meaning under a few minutes, like let's say these responses, under 5 minutes or something like this, has been challenging, for me, but valuable. And I'm implementing that in my life. I like the challenge.
I love them, and they're so like, it's like condensed sort of golden nuggets every other day. Any personal goals or focus for the next 6 months?
Yes. I'm working on a film. It's a story about a family and a father-son. It's a true story. It's a chess movie, and it's about chess, and it's about the Hindu gods, and it's about a boy who became at some juncture the youngest grandmaster at 12 and a half, named Abhimanyu Mishra, Indian outstanding chess player. And it's a story really about these lessons that he learns and that people who love chess learn, but also as we apply to life, about vision and consistency and sacrifice and devotion. And so in doing that and preparing for that, I'm playing a lot of chess and I'm working on the screenplay and the producing and all those aspects of it. But I'm also thinking a lot about and absorbing and creating content around those principles, which is personal for me on a deep level that it dovetails back in the initial conversation, initial questions that we had and discussion content at the top of this interview, which is about engaging with other individuals, and I tend to ask and share about what I'm working on, as a means to find common ground and learn. So.
Amazing, Sebastian. Sebastian, where can people get more of you?
Thank you. X, just my name, Sebastian Siegel. And on Instagram, Sebastian Siegel 1, digit 1 at the end. My website in psychology and philosophy is deeplyconscious.com. And my other website is just my name, sebastiansiegel.com. But Instagram's great. I respond to most messages there. And X also.
Beautiful. We'll link everything below. But yeah, it was such an amazing conversation again. I love how empathetic you are, passionate, optimistic. The future looks bright every time I sort of talk with you, Sebastian. And you're so kind. And yeah, I learned so much about myself and just like about life in general from today's conversation. So I'm so grateful that this conversation came in today. Today for me it's the 3rd of July, and it just fit in perfectly when I needed it. So thank you for your time today, Sebastian.
Thank you so much too. Thank you for creating the space and for everything you're doing. And I appreciate the tenderness, the confidence, and the sort of telos and commitment and integrity that you're giving to your show. And it's so important, and so I'm super grateful to be here. And thank you for the time and allowing me to share so much. That's wonderful. We're in this thing together, all the people who are listening to this, who are interested in this, who are participating in this sort of stream of thought. And I think that this is an important time for many levels because it's about to get really confusing, being able to differentiate between optics and sentience. Yeah, and this is sentient.
By the way, random side note, your hair's amazing.
Thanks. I put, today I was in the sun a lot, I didn't comb it, and I put salt and coffee oil in it. And I was outside a lot, so I got a little curly. Thanks.
Guys, if you made it this far, hopefully this was a valuable episode. Thank you so much for your time. Please let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you guys next week on another episode of the podcast. Peace.
All right, man. It's so great to see you.
You're amazing,
So glad we did
Sebastian.
this.
I'm so happy. You've made my day, you've made my week. So thank you, Sebastian. I'll keep you updated with the episode.
Thank you so much for having me. And I really enjoyed that so much, man. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Sebastian. Have a beautiful week. Bye.